In my review of the Game Boy Micro from Nintendo. Um, this is going to be a video review of a fairly rare console that was released in 2005. It was a successor to the Game Boy Advance SP, which was a successor to the Game Boy Advance. And before that, there was the Game Boy Color and the original Game Boy. Now, I'm a huge handheld collector, well, console collector in general. As you can see here, I got original Game Boy Color, Advance, Game Gear, SC Mobile 2, both models of the SP, backlit and frontlit, all three models of the DS, and finally the Game Boy Micro. Now, I managed to pick this thing up at a GameStop, brand new, maybe around 3 years ago, I think. I'm not actually sure. But basically, it was well after the system had died, and they basically just had one sitting behind the shelf, brand new, for like just collecting dust, basically. So I bought it. It was actually really cheap, and I was really excited and really surprised when I got it because this thing is awesome. Well, let's talk about the system now, I guess, before we talk about how it failed and everything. Basically, it's a handheld system, as you know, that plays and only plays your Game Boy Advance games. Now, Game Boy Advance was a very successful line. There's tons of good Game Boy Advance games out there that you can play, and they're actually fairly cheap nowadays. So if you missed out on some classics, of course you got games. Here's some of my GBA collection right here. Got the Zelda game, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, stuff like that. Classic NES series. You got some of the original Mario side scroller remakes. Kirby had plenty of good games on the system. But basically, Nintendo figured that, now remember this is around the time of the DS, so Nintendo figured, let's make a product for image conscious or whatever consumers that's really small. So I got this, and I noticed the controls are great. For the buttons feel so nice. The D-pad feels so like squishy, very comfortable. Feels very glossy, but it doesn't leave fingerprints other than unlike that beast. The buttons press so nicely; they feel very responsive. Very like squishy while having a little bit of clicky. Start and select buttons are down here, which some people don't like, but they glow blue when you turn it on and when it's charging, and they glow red when it's almost out of power. Now the screen, if you hold L and you move the volume, it'll get brighter or less brighter. Can't really see it too well in this little shot here, but yeah, it'll actually get pretty bright, almost as bright as the DS Lite. I think it might actually be brighter. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in a while. Now you'll notice that the back, even though this thing is pretty light, it's about 80 paper clips. I'm not sure if that's a game in it or not. It's made out of metal, which is really nice because just about everything made by Nintendo is made out of plastic. Not cheap plastic. I mean, this isn't like cheap, plastic stuff, but it's definitely not made out of metal. This thing was. You got the nice little Game Boy Micro logo there, and the cartridge slot takes up like most of the system, which is really weird. Sorry, I'll just have to get this thing out. I can barely. It fits in there really nicely, that's for sure. But that's not normally that hard to pull it out, but just with one hand. Look how big the cartridge slot is. It takes up like so much room. Like, look at the cartridge compared to the actual console itself. So this thing's very compact technology. So that's kind of nice. It's so small. It also has one of those little wrist strap ports, but no Nintendo console has came with a wrist strap other than the original DS. I think some of them you could buy it separately, but that's about it. Now, as for the speaker, you got a little, you can't really see it here, but you got three little holes there for the speaker. It's a pretty like low speaker, but if you're playing at home and it's kind of quiet, you can hear it fine. If you're playing at like a restaurant, you're probably not gonna be able to hear it. But the good news is that there's a headphone jack. This thing had a headphone jack. This thing had a headphone jack. This thing had a headphone jack. But these two do not have regular headphone jacks. You need to buy an adapter to use it with the SP, which is annoying for some people. But sorry about that. With this one, it's simple. You just plug some headphones in. Steal them from your iPod, and it'll work just fine. Now the L and R buttons you can't really press them from the side. You can press them from the middle just about only. They still feel very comfortable. Holding this thing is so nice. I can't stress that enough. Now the screen. Some people are worried that the screen's way too small. It's going to strain their eyes and stuff. But honestly, the screen on this thing looks great because the resolution is really high and the screen is really small. So it looks great if you put a really high resolution on a small screen. Very high quality LCD screen, very nice backlight. Now the sound slider is right here. Let me just turn it on. It's not one of those sliders, it's one of those button things, kind of like the DSi has. It's kind of annoying to keep having to press it, but it's not that big of a deal. When it's all the way up, you get this little beeping noise. There you go. Now let's see, what else can I talk about? Now the big thing that Nintendo was trying to do with this thing was the faceplates. Now basically, most game models of the Game Boy Micro, there was a couple colors that came out. There was this silver one with the black faceplate, and a pink and a blue one. There was a black one that came with a silver faceplate and a camouflage and a flame one, and there was a Famicom edition that just came with a Famicom faceplate, and that was it. But basically, all you have to do, change the faceplate. Unlike the PSP where it's a hassle, you just take this little cartridge thing, or like tool or whatever, the faceplate ejector tool as Nintendo calls it. You just put it in these little holes. You can't really see it because I'm doing this with one hand basically. But you just remove the faceplate, put it somewhere safe. Now you have a naked Game Boy Micro. It looks beautiful. No, I'm just kidding. But Nintendo doesn't recommend you play like this. I don't recommend you play like this because it can damage the screen. As you can see, the screen stays in really nice condition because you have these faceplates. Basically, yeah, the silver model, which I have, came with the nice blue faceplate and the girly like pink one. I also managed to order a silver one and a Famicom one online. Now they never, since it wasn't a success, they never sold faceplates separately in stores other than some rare third parties. But you could order the silver one and the Famicom one on Nintendo's online store for a very limited period of time because they basically just ran out of stock very quickly. But just to be cool, let's try the Famicom one. You just slide it right on there, press it down, click it, and there you go. Now your Game Boy Micro looks completely different. Obviously the Famicom one would look better on the actual Famicom Game Boy Micro. That one is red and has a little picture of Mario on the back, the 8-bit Mario, that is. But it still looks pretty cool. It looks like a Famicom controller. And this thing resembles an NES controller a lot. So it's really nice when you're playing like Mario 3 and it feels like you're playing it on an NES. Let's see, what else to talk about? And that's really it. I just love playing my Game Boy Advance games on this. I just can't stop playing on this. I play it more than I play it. I probably have more hours on this than I have my DSi. And very similar to my DS Lite, probably. Because I just love playing on this. It's so comfortable. The screen looks great. The games are great. Tons of good Game Boy Advance games to choose from. So now, before I go on to the next topic, it also came with this nice little carrying pouch Nintendo included with every Game Boy Micro. It's a very nice little soft material. You can just slide the Game Boy Micro right in. I'm not going to do it now, but you just slide it in. It's a very nice little carrying pouch, and you just pull the strings to tighten it and carry it around. But so why did this thing not do so well? Well, basically Nintendo knew that the Game Boy Advance was doing great, but they also were releasing the DS at the same time. They actually released the DS a little bit earlier, so they figured that the DS would be the third one of their big consoles, but it wasn't. It just completely took over the Game Boy Advance, and the Game Boy Advance just it wasn't worth making games for it anymore because now the big focus was the DS. It wasn't like the DS, the Game Boy just died. It just was kind of replaced, unfortunately. And plus, this thing could play the Game Boy Advance games too. So why buy the Micro when this thing is only a little bit more money? The Micro is actually kind of expensive. It was like $100 or something, which is a lot for it. Also, a decent amount of people do not like the fact that it does not play the original Game Boy games. They didn't leave the same chips in that allowed it to play the Game Boy games, so they don't let you play it. Also, they would have sticked out a ton, which looked kind of weird, but the SP could play Game Boy games, so there really wasn't much reason to upgrade from the SP. Let me just take a drink of water, I'm sorry. But anyway, drinking my Poland Spring here. Legit. Anyway, so you'd rather buy a DS at the time. That's what I thought. You know, when it came out, I'm not gonna buy that. I already have an SP, and the DS plays Game Boy games. So people just kind of never bothered. It was marketed again. It was marketed towards image conscious consumers, and it only sold about 0.95 million in America. That's not even a whole million of these sold. When the original Game Boy sold what, like 80 million, and the whole Game Boy line in total sold 200 million, and this didn't even contribute. This only contributed to that by adding a couple million. So it was really a big failure. Nintendo got rid of it fairly quickly. I think one of their quotes was that we failed to show its like value to the consumers. Because then that's the problem with it. It's awesome, but you know there's really no way of convincing people of that. But if you can find one of these today, I definitely recommend picking up. If you got some Game Boy Advance games, you know, play them. They're great. You know, this thing feels really nice. Again, such a nice console. I wish it had done better, but you know, it's a pretty nice collector's item. If you can get one of these, try to get it new because you get all the stuff, the faceplates and the pouch and the tool with it. But you know, there's really not much to say. It's just an awesome console. I love this thing. Go get one of these. Find it on Amazon, eBay. Again, try to get it new if you can't. If you can, used ones are fine too. So, thanks for watching, guys. Any questions? Leave a comment. See you.